Hi everyone, I'm Utkarsh, the author of The Seductive Illusion of Hard Work. Today is a very special day because I get to have a conversation with somebody who's obviously, been a friend or a mentor, but he's actually written, a blurb on the front page of the book. It's a chance for us to have a discussion on this topic of what is hard work and why is it so seductive from somebody who's had a distinguished career across countries and continents, and somebody who I'm proud to call a mentor, a friend, and a guide. I often turn to you, Sri, for all kinds of advice. So happy to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here, Utkarsh. Congratulations again on the book. It's no mean accomplishment. We're going to talk a little bit about this, on in this conversation. But congratulations on this accomplishment.
Thank you, Sri. Means a lot. So, let's just have a two-way dialogue about, what is hard work meant to you and why is it so seductive, your mental models for success, your career, so on and so forth. So, let's talk about essentially when you were thinking about, yourself as an 18-year-old, as a 20-year-old. Uh, could you have predicted that you will be a partner at Bain and Company living in San Francisco? What was the process of picking your career? What was it like for you? Walk us through the confusions of a 20-year-old, if at all there was any.
Well, Utkarsh, it's funny. I had all the confusions as an 18-year-old, as a 20-year-old, as a 30-year-old. I don't think it stopped for a while. I wasn't sure as an 18-year-old what I wanted to. I wasn't doing very well, by the way. A lot of people assume that I might have had a stellar academic career, and I did not. I was actually doing fairly badly. When I was finishing school, I didn't do that well. When I was in college, and I was lost. It felt, looking back, there was this big cloud in my mind, and I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. And I sort of meandered through life, I would say, for a long time. I enjoyed what I discovered was, I went to IIM Calcutta. I graduated from there, and then I discovered that I enjoyed working. To be very honest with you, and I put actually my heart and soul into it. I enjoyed many aspects of work, the intellectual challenge, getting things done. Uh, but I don't think I picked a path per se. I didn't say that I really wanted to be, let's say, in sales and marketing, or I wanted to be. The one thing I also had, uh, I would say, an affinity for was really to be in tech. It was seductive. That was the other seductive part of it, which is I wanted to be in the technology sector. So I ended up working for this company that no longer exists called DEC, or Digital Equipment, which at one point of time was the second largest computer manufacturer in the world after IBM. So I worked for them for a while. And that's really all I knew. And then I ended up, coming to the US, working here with digital, and then I ended up going to Wharton, and we can talk about that if you like. But and then I joined Bain, um, and I think Bain was the first place where I felt like I had some level of stability. I can't tell you when I joined Bain that I've been at Bain for 24 years, except for a time when I left to do a startup. But I can't tell you that when I joined Bain that I predicted I was going to be here for as long as I have. But there were many aspects of the job that I really liked. But I can also talk a little bit, during the conversation about why I left and also why I came back. Uh,
Yeah,
I'd like
that'll be
to.
super interesting to explore. But let's stay on the earlier part of your career.
Sure.
When you were, say, deciding between, your career paths and you were, interested in tech, what part of did somebody advise you into choosing X or Y? What was the thought process like?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I was pretty terrible at this. Gosh, looking back, there are some things I did really badly. One is that I didn't explore enough. And one of the things I tell my children is that they should explore, whether it's trying out new experiences, whether it's talking to people. I don't feel like I talk to enough people. I'll give you an example. So when I was applying to business schools in India, I wrote the common exam
The
for the
cat.
IIM, the CAT. I wrote the CAT at that time, and I got interview calls from. There were only three IIMs at the time. It was so far back. There were only three IIMs at the time. I got interview calls from all of them, but I also got before that I wrote an entrance exam for Generalist in Bombay. I got an interview call from there, and I went for the interview. And I happened to be standing outside waiting to go into the interview room to talk to the director, this lady. And I saw that they had a class scheduled for different majors. And one of the majors was finance, the other was operations. And I had no clue that, when you go to a business school, that you actually have the different majors. And in fact, I remember going into the interview room and this lady asked me, "So, what do you think you want to major in?" And I just read on the notice board that there was a major for finance and operations. So I said, "Well, I think I want to do operations." I had no idea what an operations major was, and I didn't talk to enough people. I didn't really understand what this was all about. I didn't explore. And one of the things that I really tell people these days is spend the time to figure out what you might like and what you might not like. Even, take advantage of experiences that you can have today that I potentially didn't have. So I was clueless, to be honest with you.
Sri, one theme that I touch upon in the book, in the earlier parts of it, is the whole notion of pressure to conform
Yeah,
to something, to stability, to what's considered the right path. And
yeah,
do you think that has changed in India or other parts of the world? And now that you've lived in multiple parts of the world and interacted with
yeah.
people from around the world, do you think it's more of an Indian or a South Asian thing, feeling a pressure to, know what you want to do with your life early on, or it's all pervasive?
I think it is certainly it's much sharper in the South Asian community, especially in the Indian community. And you see it in the Indian diaspora around the world. You see it here in the Bay Area where I live. You have families who put a lot of pressure on their kids. They may say, well, we don't really put pressure on our kids, but that's not true. I think, the way they overschedule the kid, there's a lot of expectation around what the kids should do. But this is not to say, there's some kids who are naturally gifted, who are, who have the ability to deal with all of this and who are extremely talented. But I know of a lot of children over here, for example, and this is true for India as well, where it's very clear that what they're doing is to really conform to their parents' expectations. There's a great saying that I read once that the greatest threat to a childhood is the unlived life of the parent. And when you are a parent who has all these expectations of a child, and you're trying your child to do all these things, there is something that you end up missing out on. There's something about the childhood that this part about the exploration you just never do, right? How do you bring out from within what is it that the child really wants to do? But there's also societal pressure, there's economic pressure, right? People are concerned about job prospects, people are concerned about sustainability, economic sustainability. So I can understand a lot of this, but there's a lot of pressure.
There is, and it seems to exist like it existed when you were in your early 20s. It still exists.
Yes.
Perhaps it's becoming a lot more competitive as well. But what I through the book I argue that if you want to really create a category of one for
Yeah.
yourself, you need to essentially follow your curiosity. So
Yeah.
a phrase that we hear often is like follow your passion. But
Yeah.
I've always found that one, passions change over time, and
Yeah.
second is that it's also fairly hard to figure out
Yeah.
what's the one or two things that you're passionate about. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on this entire passion argument? What is passion to you, and like
Yeah.
how is it manifested in your life?
Yeah. That's a great question, Utkarsh. I hear a lot of people say what the advice that they give youngsters is, follow your passion. When I think back on my growing up years, it was not clear that I had a passion. And it's not clear that if I had really followed all the different things that I wanted to do, that it would have been the right thing for me. And I think, therefore, it's become a little bit of a cliche, which is to follow your passion. There are times when you need to wander a little bit and let your passion find you. And I think I'm a big believer in that. You just don't know if you're not open. You just don't know what might come your way. And so I think there are two categories of people. I know there are kids, who at the age of 8 are very clear about what they want to do and, pursue the passion all the way through and become very successful. But I think there are a lot of people who, like me, for a very long time, I had this discussion with my daughter, who and I show this graph of my life. I'm very analytical this way, so I show this graph of my life, and I tell her there are points when, for a very long time, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I discovered that maybe consulting is something that I enjoy, I like. But even that took a while. It's not like I came into Bain and I said, this is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my
Hmm.
life. But over a period of time, I discovered there were many elements of this that I really like, and I felt like I could pursue. But what is your point of view? Tell us a little bit. Actually, I want to turn the tables over you, Utkarsh. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about your point of view on following your passion.
Shri, in that regards, I think your daughter and I have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
Both Shri and I have multiple interests and multiple curiosities.
Mm-hmm.
And then you and I also have some things in common, right?
Mm-hmm.
Business school, interests in business, tech, all of that. And I have struggled to in my early 20s to figure out do they need to be exclusive? Do you
Mm-hmm.
need to pick a path in your early 20s? And the answer that I'm much clearer now, with the
Mm-hmm.
benefit of 5 7 years of experience, that it doesn't need to be exclusive so early, but you can
Mm-hmm.
perhaps look at your curiosities and then essentially let data guide the way. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
realize that, say writing energizes you and it's not a
Mm-hmm.
one off thing, it regularly energizes you,
Mm-hmm.
then the next micro experiment would be to actually start writing consistently and see whether you have any readers. The micro experiment after that would be,
Sure.
okay, perhaps can I publish a blog?
Yeah.
If that goes well, you basically need to up your stakes. But the realization that I had is that you don't need to know from the very beginning, as long as you're willing to conduct multiple micro experiments. So I think what has
Sure.
worked well for me,
Mm-hmm.
in just being comfortable with myself, is the fact that as long as I'm conducting micro experiments and learning from them, I'm okay. I don't need
Got it.
to be too successful too soon or prove a point to anybody but myself. That I'm making some progress, and then through writing, I've discovered that progress actually gives a lot of meaning and satisfaction, much more than arriving somewhere. The truth of the matter is that whether you're a partner at Bain, um, or an entrepreneur trying to figure things out and build something, you'll never arrive. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's 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 like it's a series, and if you need to enjoy the process to go there. So I think that way, combining a bit of the analytical aspect of you and the curiosity of people like your daughter is something that I found quite rich comfort in.
And tell us, Utkarsh, so this point around micro experiments is great, right? Which is that you try something, see if you like it, see if you want to pursue it. But tell us a little bit about the book itself. Forget about writing a blog. You write a column every week for the Mint. I know uh, you blog regularly. But the thought of putting together a book just seems like extremely daunting. And did you know from the beginning that you were going to write a book? And did you say, okay, this is the path to my writing a book? How did you think about that?
So, Shri, some part of it is that I've seen my mother, right? My mother is a writer
Okay.
and a professor. So I've actually, and like her father, my late Nana, was also a writer. Everybody in my family has been very interested in this craft. Actually, not too many people in my family are in the business space. Nobody is
Hmm.
actually, just my brother and I. So writing was something that I always wanted to do. I
Hmm.
realized through my micro experiments that I was enjoying the process, and I was actually being able to communicate my point better every time. So I was able to
Hmm.
see progress in the writing,
Hmm.
and the enjoyment never ceased. It never became a task. So I thought
Hmm.
that the journey from, say, a tweet to a blog to an article, to a longer article to a book might be something that I enjoy. Because at the same time, Sri, I was also thinking about what I want to do with network capital, right? Should it
Hmm.
be, a passion project, or should it be, something larger, something which is, a full-time engagement? So for that, I also wanted to see whether, my theory of work in the 21st century, how should young people think about their careers? At least my point of view, does it have an audience?
Hmm.
And book is something that is, that's a decent challenge if you can put it together, and then there is decent audience readership for it. Then perhaps what you have to say, you have one more data point that you're perhaps on the right track. So it was intentional that way. It was something that I also wanted to figure out whether I had something that people wanted to listen. But there's also a role of people reaching out. So what happened was that the book was a result of multiple serendipities as well
Hmm.
as intentional steps. So
Yes.
the graduation from, say, the World Economic Forum writing I did to the Mint articles to the Harvard Business Review articles just got me a lot more readership each time with each
Hmm.
step. And
Hmm.
until around the time of Mint and World Economic Forum, I started getting some inbound requests from publishers saying that there is a book here. We are just surprised you haven't written it yet. Would you be interested? I said, of course. Like, I hadn't figured it out then, but I said, like, I would love to give it a shot.
Yes.
And that's essentially how it came. So readership grew, then inbound started coming a little bit from the publishers.
Yeah.
And what I knew was that I did enjoy the process. And so writing the book was clarifying for me also from that standpoint, Sri.
So, Utkarsh, I want to explore one topic with you, which you and I have never spoken about, which is the importance of writing, even if it's for an audience of one. Right.
Yeah.
And, my point of view is that while you've had, a successful blog, a set of articles, and even a very successful book, I, I feel that that everyone should write. I feel that it's like to your point you made earlier, it's a very clarifying process. It's a very clarifying exercise that everyone should write. And that there is a sense. I know I write. I don't really. I mean, I've written articles that have come out in the press and so on. I'm not as prolific as you, but separate from what I put out there, I do write for myself. I just find it sometimes clarifying, sometimes cathartic. Uh, what's your point of view on that, Utkarsh?
I agree. I think writing is you always write for actually a small audience. So when
Hmm.
I wrote, I wrote the book keeping in mind, essentially people like my younger brother or your daughter, people who are in
Hmm.
their early 20s, late
Hmm.
teens, people perhaps 30s, 40s as well, who might be in the process of figuring things out, and what are the
Hmm.
things that they should know as they create their category of one. But it wasn't like thousands of people. I just kept like 5, 7 people who I wanted to write this book for. And it's something that I've realized now that more established writers do. They tend to
Hmm.
not write for like 10 million people. They write for a small, keeping in mind a small set of people. And then it
Hmm.
so happens that a lot of what you have to say, if you write it reasonably well, it resonates with a lot more. So writing is a life skill, Shri. I mean, whether you're a partner at Bain or you're
Mm-hmm.
a teenager trying to, express his or her thoughts, it's really
Yeah,
important to be able to communicate that, because writing enables you to think better and
sure.
translate the thoughts that are, say, up in the air into
Yep.
tangible words. And I see that in your writing. I see that you've also written and co-authored a whole bunch of reports, right? Like
Yeah.
the long form, detailed stuff that Bain
Yeah.
puts out.
Yeah.
So I think that's a micro book in itself. Like that's
Yeah.
those are like rich documents filled with data. Do you feel like smarter after writing, or does the process of writing make you smarter?
The process does. So it's interesting, Utkarsh. So my articles for the most part are written by me, right? Maybe a little less so today than earlier, but I remember, within Bain, people would say, "Why don't you tell us a topic and we'll put it together?" And I was like, "No, that's not what I want to do. First of all, it's got to be my thinking. And more importantly, it's got to be my voice. I have a
Yeah.
certain way of expressing myself, and I want that to come out in what I write. And so it's very, very important, especially when you and I were together in Davos. I used to write these articles, about my experience over there, and that was completely my voice, my experience, the way I thought about things, and that's actually quite important. So I would say maybe the one key takeaway, if not anything else from this conversation for people who are listening, is build this life skill of writing, right? And if you can get help, to do it, so much the better. But it's actually very, very important. I know that with new tools and new technologies, people might feel like, why do I need to really write? But the aspect of getting more clarity on your thinking, the way you do that through writing and structure and all of that, I think is very important.
Yeah, and what's happening, Sri, is that people now are leaving their jobs,
Hmm.
full-time jobs, to
Hmm.
basically start newsletters
Hmm.
and write blogs. So basically, this
Hmm.
communication industry, if you do it really well, it can also be a
Hmm.
thriving career. So another point
Hmm.
that I make in the book is that if you know how to write well and if you know how to
Hmm.
speak well, which
Hmm.
obviously people like leaders like you do, but there are traditional careers for it. For
Hmm.
example, jobs like Microsoft and Bain and
Hmm.
other companies like that. But you can also have these your own writing and your own voice as
Yeah.
a viable career.
Yeah. Uh,
So there are people.
And I was going to say, of course, I was going to agree. I completely agree with that. I do think, the emphasis is that irrespective of whether that becomes a career or not, irrespective of whatever you choose to do in life, it's a great life skill. It's a,
Yeah.
it's an ability for you to have clarity in your thoughts. It's an ability for you to think about, uh, you know, how you can persuade other people to come to your point of view, how to even become better in terms of what you're doing. So all of those things are actually very important, I would say. Uh, I want to continue to stay on this topic of the book, Utkarsh, and also your writing. Creativity is very hard. I can tell you, I work a lot with clients of mine who keep saying we want our organization to be creative, and it's very tough. Especially when the culture of an organization has become set. I don't want to use the word ossified, but let's say it's become set. The
Yeah.
culture that's developed over a long period of time, and a new CEO comes in and says, "I really want to change the culture, and I want people in my organization to become more creative." I can just tell you, it's obviously very tough. Um, what is your perspective? Let's explore this from two angles. One is your personal angle of how you think about creativity, and then how you think about creativity in organizations.
Yeah. I mean, let's jam on this a little bit because I think you have a lot more to say on this than I. But my creativity, whatever that is a function of the micro experiments that I have been conducting for a very long time.
Hmm.
Like I act, seriously, I write seriously. I enjoy having difficult conversations with people with an intention of learning, not so much to
Mm-hmm.
proving them wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually quite comfortable, broaching sensitive topics over dinner. Sometimes people don't like it, but it's also I find that you need to go deeper sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to have an explore. I think I remember once you and I were in a car with a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of people on a very cold night, and like there was a politically sensitive conversation going on at that time, and I think both you and I leaned into it. We were not saying
Mm-hmm.
that, oh my, we need to look the
Mm-hmm.
other way. I think we briefly had that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of what I know and the examples that I've put in my book are lived experiences of
Mm-hmm.
stories that I've directly seen or, friends of mine, mentors of mine have told me and participated in. So one is just like, you need to let experiences come to you, which I
Mm-hmm.
think has worked well for me. The other thing, Shri, is that when you combine disciplines, right, like
Mm-hmm.
engineering, management, poetry, mythology, liberal arts, you
Mm-hmm.
combine all of them, you're able to approach, say, a culture problem
Mm-hmm.
from the lens of, say, math,
Mm-hmm.
and a math problem from
Mm-hmm.
the lens of history, and it
Yeah.
just makes some of these connections stronger.
Yeah.
And the third, which is, I think, a little bit related also, is that I think the sets of people that you
Mm-hmm.
regularly keep in touch with. For example, you and I now know each other for, I think, 7, 8 years. And the
That's right.
conversation was like, it started off as a, general conversation about, general things. There was no
Mm-hmm.
like no outcome that was expected.
Yeah.
You didn't want anything from me, I didn't want anything from you. But the sheer, if you keep in touch with the wide set of people from different backgrounds, I think you get smarter. I
Yeah.
feel that you just learn a lot more. And I think these things have really, I think, enabled me to become slightly more creative. Um, and I'm reading this really interesting book by Matt Ridley. It's about how innovation works.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll enjoy it as well. He
Mm-hmm.
talks about the fact that innovation is often slow, messy, involves lots of luck,
Yeah.
lots of time, and there are lots of people involved in the process. I think same is true for any amount of creativity, I feel.
Yeah.
So I think that's my take. What do you feel? And then we can jam a little bit on
Yeah.
the
No,
organizational question.
so my take on this is very similar to yours, Utkarsh. I'll tell you my lived experience, which is when I work with CEOs, um, and they talk about this, right? So my advice to them is that creativity is a process for which you have to have a lot of patience. You can't say, I'm going to flip a switch. This individual is suddenly going to become creative, or the organization is suddenly going to become creative or innovative, right? Whichever lens you want to use. And so the thing is that you have to be patient. You have to explore. To the earlier point we were discussing, you have to be okay with failure. You have to, in fact, showcase individuals who have taken chances and you should be okay with the fact that they extended themselves but may not necessarily have succeeded. The problem is that most organizations reward only success. They don't reward, innovation. They don't reward the people who go out on a limb to do something. And so that's at the organization level. The other thing that I'll say is that when I talk to CEOs, what I find, what they find most useful is not necessarily the expertise that I might bring to the table about their industry. But very interestingly, it's my knowledge of other industries.
Yeah.
And over the course of my career at Bain, I worked across a whole range of industries. It might be healthcare, financial services, construction. I'm working right now on enterprise, with an enterprise software company over here in the valley. The interesting thing is that people feel like, I know my industry. So if I'm talking to somebody in enterprise software, he say, well, I know enterprise software. But I tell them, think about, if I give an example of how a consumer products company is approached, let's say channel management, or thinking about new avenues of growth, suddenly it sparks a conversation that's very different. And then it becomes a back and forth about, okay, is this applicable to me? How can I apply it to my industry? And so part of I think what people need to be aware of is that it's not just about developing deep expertise in one thing, which is very important these days. But it's also, making sure you have the peripheral vision about what's going on in other places as well.
Yeah.
Uh, that combination, then when you bring it all together, can be very potent. So that's
I
that's
completely agree on that point. I want to ask you a quick follow-up on that, on the failure aspect of it.
hmm
Because I mean, many clients of yours must be public companies that have
hmm
to be very intentional about their performance every quarter.
yeah.
Um, are they more risk averse on average because they can't afford to fail, or are they risk averse because they think that what got them here will get them to the next level? Or is there
I think
something else?
no, I think it's much more so the latter, which is that there's a certain way that we've been operating for a long time. There is also a lot of resistance within the organization, right, to doing new ways of things. So my advice to clients of mine is it starts from the top. If you're really serious about this, you have to make a public commitment to doing this. As a CEO, you have to say, this is important to me. I believe in this and I'm going to see this through. And seeing this through is not trying it out for a quarter or two, but it may be trying it out for many, many years, right? Putting in place the right people, the most talented people that you can find, putting them in charge of things that you don't know whether they're going to be successful or not, and then if it's not, making sure that they're recognized for the effort and for what they did, but and try again. Otherwise, if you try something for a quarter and you say, well, it didn't work, let's go back to what we are doing, there's going to be somebody else who's going to come and disrupt your industry, right? I mean, we've seen so many examples. You
Yeah.
have to find a way to continue to invest in things that are going to be important for the future of your industry.
Yeah. And I think just for the listeners, the point that you made about looking at different sectors from different lens. I mean, in technology today, product management is the new aspirational job. A lot of people want to be that, but it comes essentially, from my understanding, from the FMCG world. People used to
Right.
have product managers for ketchups and so on and so forth, and now they've taken the same job, recreated it in the tech industry, and it happened because a lot of cross pollination that somebody thought of and then
Yeah.
created in this
Yeah.
space. So, really well said about looking at the same things from different lenses.
Yeah.
Sri, so now, based on what we've discussed, I want to ask you two more questions
Sure.
just on the coming on these 2 points. One is about deep generalism, a deep
hmm
generalist, and
hmm
the other is about intelligence. So
hmm
let me start with the intelligence bit.
Sure.
In the book, I talk about intelligence comes in different shapes or forms, right? In
hmm
many parts of the world, usually intelligence is considered your analytical ability, your
hmm
math ability, your ability to take certain kinds of tests.
Yeah.
And I do feel that even prestigious companies, very big companies, top-notch companies, are really biased towards, they equate intelligence of that kind to being intelligence of all kinds. But in
hmm
your experience of managing hundreds of people, thousands of people, hired people, fired people, like I don't know if you fired people or not, but like generally, like having a wide exposure of
hmm
lots of people,
hmm
do you really think intelligence comes in different shapes and shades and forms? And if yes, how did you learn about this?
Well, first of all, I completely agree that intelligence comes in different shapes and forms. And I will say that in the context of India, we sometimes mistake the ability to do well and standardized tests as a form of intelligence. Yeah, let me make that assertion over there, right? This is not to say that people who do well in standardized tests are not intelligent, but I think the reverse is also true. The reverse is true, which is that people who don't necessarily do well in standardized tests doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. Um, and then we place a lot of emphasis on GPAs and so on. It was interesting when we started Bain in India in 2006. We went to the IIMs. We recruited from there, and we didn't. We were a little clueless, even though I myself am from an IIM. It had been many years since I'd gone back to campus to recruit. I remember, we went back to campus. We started recruiting over there. We were told that the rule was that you're going to ask the students their GPA or something like that. I forget what it was. Anyway, um, so we said, okay, fine. Yeah, in fact, in the US, we don't.
Yeah,
When we
it's a
recruit in
great
business schools,
non-disclosure. Yeah.
there's a great non-disclosure in most schools. So in fact, we don't do that. And our experience was that it's really not had an impact in terms of the quality of talent we bring in, right? So when we bring in people into the US, we find that we find out later what the GPAs might be. There's really no correlation in terms of
Hmm.
how well they do at Bain with the GPA. I think it's an indicator. I think and a GPA is a marker. It shouldn't be the only marker or shouldn't be the only indicator of how you assess an individual's potential. Um, but I do think analytical skills for the jobs that we do at Bain, for example, is very important. So we do tests for that. So irrespective of what your GPA might be.
The
But to
cases
go
and
back
all.
to yeah, but to go back to the story of to my so when we went to the IIMs, the long story short, we recruited some people, who we discovered later had terrible GPAs, but they did well. They ended up doing really well at Bain. And then we found out that actually all the other all the other consulting firms and recruiters were doing was actually figuring out GPAs in another way before
Hmm.
they even put anyone on the interview list or made an offer. But our lived experience as an organization is that there are many things that are important. How the individual fits into the team is important. Uh, Obviously, the analytical skills are extremely important given the kind of job, given what we do for our clients. But there are many other things that we have found are extremely important for an individual to have long-term potential in our company, and that's true for every firm. What the points of emphasis are different for different firms, but every firm should figure out, what is it that they really want to test for? What is it that, based on their experience, will enable, an individual to succeed?
Yeah. And I think this is something that I wish a lot more recruiters sort of focused on. And in most great colleges abroad, there is great non-disclosure.
Hmm.
But grade should be taken as one metric, not the sole metric. Unfortunately, it becomes here the qualifying
That's,
criteria.
that's right.
Yeah. And now let's tell me about your deep generalist aspect. So in the book, I talk about two different models. One is the Tiger Woods model, which is
Hmm.
knowing from the get-go that I want to be a great golfer at 3. You're already at a significantly higher level than other people. And the other is the Roger Federer model, where you sort
Hmm.
of try, tinker, expose yourself to different kind of sports and experiences, and then apply the learning of one to the other and get to a certain level. Both are successful. What are you? Are you a specialist? Are you a generalist? Are you a deep generalist? um, Tell me that, and then I have a few questions
Yeah,
on that
so
space.
I am a generalist. I think, it comes from when I was growing up. So even one of the reasons why, I talked about this, that I didn't do really well academically. I didn't do well, not really. I didn't do well at all, in school, in high school, and then even in college, I did just sort of okay. But part of the reason was that I used to read a lot. I loved reading. I loved, I would go down rabbit holes of authors and books and so on. And one would argue, that it was a wasted youth, so to speak, that I spent all this time reading. But I just loved, I remember my room had all these bookshelves, and the one indulgence my parents and grandparents, were able to give me was that. Or going to lending libraries. They don't exist anymore in India, but when I was growing up, this was there all over the place. You could go to become a member of a lending library and borrow books. And so for people of my generation, that was quite important. But what I think it did for me was it opened my eyes to a lot of things, and I loved continuing to explore different areas. one of the reasons why I'm in consulting, by the way, just, we haven't explored this, is that I like the fact that I work on different areas. That, because of the nature of what we do for a living, that we end up working on different areas, explore different things. And I still learn a lot. Today, every sort of engagement, every project that I do is a learning experience. And that is one of the primary reasons why I've continued to be in consulting as long as. But even within consulting, to your point, Utkarsh, you can be a deep specialist, or you could be a deep generalist, or you could just be a generalist. I'm definitely not a specialist. I can be, I can tell you. I'm probably a deep generalist. I've worked in a variety of areas, and I've become deeper because of the number of years, not because of anything else. I've become, after 24 years of being at Bain, I've become deeper on a whole range of areas. Um, and so I'm definitely a generalist. I want to be a generalist. I feel like if I was, for me personally, if all I did was one thing over and over again, I think it would frustrate me. So this, for me, exploration is still very much a part of my life. It's very much part of
Yeah.
my DNA. And I find that, there are individuals, especially as you become more senior, as you become a CEO, as you become, let's say part of a board, whatever that might be. This is a very important aspect of what makes you successful, right? It's not just the focus on the numbers for today, which you have to do, you have to deliver that. But for you to set up an organization for the future, you have to know a lot more. You have to be exploring, you have to discover a lot
Hmm.
more.
So Shri, you have again, like you have expertise in a lot of areas, right? TMT, enterprise SaaS, like the Bain website lists like many areas of your clients or project. Um, when you start learning some of these new areas, perhaps some of them would be new.
Yeah.
What helps you grasp concepts quickly? How do you upskill yourself? And is it different from the way you upskill yourself when you were, say, 25 or 35, something like that?
Yeah. That's a great question, Utkarsh. I'll tell you, when I was starting off at Bain, I would say the way I would do it is I would read, right? I would go find things to read, and I would. So when I started off at Bain, I did a lot of work in the enterprise software space. A lot of my clients were in enterprise software, and part of it also came because I developed a deep interest in it. So one of my partners, I was a consultant at the time, but one of my partners asked me once, and it was a great question. He said, "What do you do when you're not at work?" And
Hmm.
what aspects of work do you pursue when you're not at work, if you know what I mean, right?
Hmm.
And I reflected on it, and what I was doing actually was I was reading up a lot on enterprise software. I really
Hmm.
liked learning more about that. And so it's sort of, it's an indication of what might be of interest to you and what you might want to pursue, right? Today, it's more about talking to people, right? People who might have expertise in that. In fact, obviously, there's probably not a topic, that we don't have someone at Bain or even outside that we one couldn't talk to.
Hmm.
And so that's what I do. So this point about, during the early stages of my career, or even when I was growing up, that I didn't talk to enough people, I'm trying to remedy that. I'm trying to rectify that. So I do spend a lot of time talking to people to understand the topic.
So people, like, engaging with people, when you do that, you need to know the right kind of questions to ask. And, it's more people centric. You're a lot
Yeah,
more.
yeah. And just on that, Utkarsh, I think we stress a lot about, do we have the right questions? Are we trying to appear intelligent or not? And I used to have that as well, by the way. I'll just tell you that, I would advise people, don't worry, don't worry about having the perfect question about, don't just go have a conversation, see where it takes you, right?
Hmm.
Don't be afraid of appearing dumb. I used to be very afraid of, am I appearing intelligent or not? After all, I'm at Bain and Company. What will people think if I ask a dumb question? And now I don't worry about it at all. I'm very open. There are, by the way, there are even today there are times when I will a set of time with a brand new consultant because that individual knows something about a topic that I want to learn more about. And they're like, what can we tell you? And I'll tell them, you'll be surprised. You know more about this topic than I do, and I want to learn from you. And so I think this aspect of don't worry about what people are going to think. Just go and have the conversation and see what happens. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I wish
Utkarsh,
more people at 25 would get this advice because, at 25, there's this urge to be in control, be smart.
yeah,
And I think when you actually get more
and appear
success, you
smart,
get more
and appear
confident.
smart,
Yeah.
and appear
Yeah. There's a
smart.
lot of pressure there.
I remember that. I mean, forget at 25. I probably was like that at 35. That was true for a lot of my life, and I just discovered that over the course of my life, people don't remember the fact that you asked a stupid question. Surprisingly, right? So
Hmm.
it's not like they're
This is
going
powerful
around for the
insight. Yeah.
yeah. It's not like they're going around for the rest of their lives thinking, "Oh my God, Shri, what a dumb question this guy asked in 1984 or whatever it is." Right? They don't remember that. But if you don't ask those questions, you're never going to grow. You're never going to learn. So anyway, Utkarsh, where I wanted to go next was back to you. I wanted to, um, one of the big gaps that I found, whether it's people in their personal lives or in organizations, is taking an idea and taking it through to execution, right? Completing something. I think a lot of people have great ideas. I'm sure, they're sitting around saying, oh, this is a great, what the world needs something like this, to put it another way. But they don't take it through to execution. It could be a variety of reasons. It could be that they don't have the opportunity, they don't have the access. But for people, let's say, who have the access and maybe even the opportunity to take through the execution, they don't do it. I want to talk a little bit about your own experience. It might be the book, it might be network capital. It may go back to your framing of this as doing micro experiments. What advice do you have to people in terms of how to take, it may be a great idea that they have and how to take that through to completion, to execution?
Yeah, Shri, I think we should also jam on this question because people will learn a lot more from your take on this. But my 2 cents on this is a bit related to what you said about enterprise software. Stuff that you would do in your free time or stuff that you would do anyway. Because I think everyone can make a really meaningful, successful, and financially viable career if they choose smartly. If I try to play somebody else's game, I will never ever, you know, get to a certain level because, I mean, I'm just playing on somebody else's terms, somebody else's game. But the choice of the problem that you want to focus on and the people you want to work with, um, I think is most important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I was thinking about, who to ask blurbs for, right? Like, who should I essentially go to for writing my foreword, asking the publisher had given me, I think, 5 or 6, slots that they give authors for nonfiction. And I was thinking, who should, and I invite. So my first filter was that, okay, does that person really know me, my thought process well?
Mm-hmm.
And has this person really seen me through, the course of time and seen my, decision making change? And, whether it's you, whether it's, Professor Klaus Schwab at the World
Mm-hmm.
Economic Forum or Dr. Tarun Khanna from Harvard Business School, and, other mentors of mine. I was very intentional about that because a lot of what I have done in my life, the interesting stuff, has come from choosing problems well and
Mm-hmm.
partnering with people meaningfully.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of my relationships last. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
my problems that I focus on, they are problems that I generally find very interesting. So the book, I think the process of writing it was very interesting because I was not interested in writing a bestseller. I was not
Mm-hmm.
interested in writing the best book. I was not interested in writing the Bible of X. I was very
Hmm.
interested in picking things that I found naturally very curiosity inducing, like deep generalist, concept of failure. How do you bounce back?
Hmm.
Should you overcome the pressure of performance by this way or that way? So it made the process very rewarding. And the byproduct of that is that because you choose something that you would naturally do in your free time, so it doesn't seem like pressure or work.
Hmm.
Um, so choice is the most important thing. Every time I have followed or done something where I felt that, oh, I should do this
Hmm.
because, it is a rational thing to do or it is what everybody else does, I think the results have been suboptimal. Every
Hmm.
time I've said that, okay, how do I let my natural curiosity be unbridled,
Hmm.
unblemished? I think that's the times when the project has gone on to conclusion and yielded favorable results. So, Shri, there is, this article, the first article I wrote for Harvard Business Review was called Creating Your Category of One, Building Your
Hmm.
Category of One.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
there I argued this point that as long as you don't want to become a partner at Bain just because you look at Shree's life and love Shree's life
Yeah.
and you want to, become a partner because you like, what you see from the outside, that can be one metric,
Yeah.
but that cannot be your defining metric that I want
Yeah.
X because I see X. It needs to come from within. And this realization didn't come to me one fine day. This realized because I did try to make some of these decisions where I was trying to, do the right thing or do the thing which was expected out of me. But it was less satisfying and less successful than when I really drew from my inner curiosity.
Yeah. But
Take on
just to
this, like,
yeah, but just to continue the thought, right, Utkarsh. So let's say there are people who are listening to this or watching this who also have ideas similar to it could be doesn't have to be writing a book. Let's take network capital, right? And so who have an idea but haven't really acted on it, right? They haven't sort of taken forget the third step. They haven't taken the first step. What is your advice to them now that you've taken network capital to a certain stage? You forget the book. The book is an outcome of many things, but let's talk about network capital. Right?
yeah.
What's your they're maybe they're as curious as you are. Maybe they've explored as many things as you have. They come up with a few, maybe not just one, but many good ideas, but they haven't acted on it. What's your
Yeah.
sense of what's going on over there and what they should do?
So, Shri, we on Network Capital, we run these weekend cohort-based programs where
Yeah.
we are very proud to have you as our faculty for CEO fellowship. But there's another fellowship that we run, which we call "I Don't Know What I Want to Do with My Life" fellowship. Because our theory is that most people don't know what they want to do with our lives, and we are all figuring it out one micro experiment at a time. So in the fellowship, we basically the first week is spent on doing one micro experiment or just like figuring out, look, if you want to build a career in policy, okay, take the first step. We will help you, we'll connect you, we'll like give you the support system that's required. But the most important step is to scale down the experiment. So if you want to become, if you want to build a career in consulting,
Yeah.
just like do the first step. Just see whether you write like enjoying creating the first, draft of the, say Bain report on.
Sure.
Do you find it curiosity inducing? And the results were such many people after they did their scaled down micro experiment, they realized, oh, actually, I love it or I hate it.
Sure.
And both answers are quite revealing.
Sure.
So you want to scale down these experiments, make it super simple to do. Because if you don't like the first step or the second step at all,
Yeah.
it is unlikely that you will like the finished product. It is possible. It is possible. Sometimes the first few steps are really hard and then you start having fun. But you should have an intuitive sense of whether this particular thing is in your direction or not. So make it super easy, super simple, super scaled down. Want to start a coffee shop? Just open a lemonade stand on in your neighborhood. See whether you can get two people to come On network capital, I said, okay, forget building $1 billion, $1 trillion company. Those metrics anyway don't mean anything. Can I find 1,000 people around the world who would be willing to spend $10 a month on
Mm-hmm.
advancing their careers? This
Mm-hmm.
was like a very important goal for me. That
Mm-hmm.
can't I, and does the
Mm-hmm.
process of getting there excite me or not? And
Yeah.
what do I learn? And the result of that micro experiment, and thousand also was also much later. Thousand was a more elaborate goal.
Yeah.
Um, the first step was, can I get like 10 people? Can I get one person to
Mm-hmm.
actually put in their credit card for something which was so nebulous to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
career advancement, mentoring, these are not new terms, but
Mm-hmm.
perhaps a community based model where peer learning is done at scale.
Yeah.
Will people actually engage in something like that? So the experiments leaded me towards that. And I think if I did something well was to look at the scaled down version of it and really analyze how I felt doing that.
That's a great concept, Utkarsh, and I think it's a great way to think about new opportunities, new careers. I know we're running out of time. I'll just leave one thought, for the group. Part of, I think, the stickiness, the what prevents people from trying new things, um, is also that in many instances their sense of identity is tied to what they're doing,
Yeah.
right? And therefore they find it very difficult to give that up. Certainly, I can tell you, as you continue to spend more time in an organization, your sense of identity is tied to that organization. And I've seen many instances where people find it just extremely difficult to give that up because they don't know how to create a new identity for themselves, how to give up what they have and then to create a new identity for themselves. And it's not an easy process. And so I would suggest to this group, if that's part of also what you're going through, it may be that you have great ideas, you want to explore them, you're doing all the things, of course, that you're advising, doing the micro experiments, scaling down something and trying and seeing if you like it, but you're still not able to make that next step because of this fact that I am who I am because of what I do today, and I'm not sure about therefore whether I want to be something else in the future. Is that um, a group of mentors and a group of supporters? All the things we've talked about during this conversation. Those can be extremely helpful and very powerful to help you take you on your journey. So part of this is not just having the great ideas, it's also about, creating a vision for the future that's separate from what you're doing today. So separating your
Yeah.
identity from what you're doing today. So
Yeah, that's such an important mental model to think about. And you briefly alluded to the fact that you left Bain, and then you came back to Bain. And I think like now that you've been there for 24 years at such a senior level, you also must feel really attached
yeah,
to the brand and attached to the job. So I can only imagine like leaving that company would not have been easy, and
yeah,
coming back might have felt coming back home. I don't know, but I think you have direct experience of talking about what you just
yeah,
mentioned.
yeah. I did that much earlier in my career. This was actually was 20 years ago in the early stages of my career with Karsh. Um, but it's a challenge that continues to exist for people who've been like me, who've been at a firm for a very long time. And so I do have there's a good part of my identity that is tied to Bain. So the fact that you referred to me as, let's say, a partner at Bain and Company, over this course of the conversation, or the fact that I was the managing partner for Bain in India for many years, uh, those are very much the way people refer to me, right? And therefore, it's become a
Yeah.
part of my identity, right? And so if I was to leave Bain, would I have that identity? Would people still refer to me as, as being associated with Bain? And would that still be important? Would people still value what I have to say because I'm no longer at Bain? I'm giving that as an example. For many people, when you've been at an organization for a while, that organization becomes very much a part of their identity and becomes a sticky glue because of which you're not really able to create or envision a new future for yourself. So it's one of the things to really think about.
Definitely, Shri. This was such a fascinating conversation. It really means a lot that you wrote the forward, the blurb for my book, and that you spent an hour with us discussing the seductive illusion of hard work. I
Yeah.
this conversation and the thousands of people who've logged in, they would have learned so much. Really excited, for your next class in the CEO fellowship. Ever so grateful for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Utkarsh, for having me. It's been a pleasure. And congratulations again on the book. It's a great read. And it's not surprising it's done as well as it has.